Welcome back to Close Up. We have a first-time candidate breaking onto the scene in New Hampshire's 1st Congressional District. Hollie Noveletsky joins us this morning as she challenges 3-term incumbent Chris Pappas. Hollie, thanks for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. It's an honor.
So to start out, tell us a little bit about who you are and why you're running.
Well, I've decided to run because, like many Americans and people in New Hampshire, I think we got frustrated in seeing the dysfunction down in D.C. And I could either be angry and yell at the TV, or I could be part of the solution. And I think my background brings a lot to the table. I am a small business owner. I own Novel Ironworks in Greenland, New Hampshire. And I also own Rose Steel, which is a structural steel fabrication company. But I'm also a psychiatric and a geriatric nurse practitioner, and I worked through the pandemic. And I've got 10 years in the military. I did 8 years in the Army Reserve as a captain in the Nurse Corps. And then I finished out my 10 years in the New Hampshire National Guard.
Tell us a little bit about the case you would make against Chris Pappas, why voters should make a change.
I think that Chris Pappas has voted party line. And New Hampshire, he's put party politics ahead of New Hampshire and New Hampshire's concerns. We need people who can look across party lines. He had promised to talk and negotiate across party lines, and we're not really seeing that. All the votes have been right down the line, and people in New Hampshire are hurting. We need people who are going to stand up for our citizens, and I have that ability as a CEO, negotiating, as a psychiatric nurse practitioner, speaking to people from different perspectives, and I think I can bring that to the table. And with a military background, getting things done.
This starts a Republican primary as well.
Yep.
Why should Republicans choose you over Russell Prescott?
Well, I'm not a politician. I have not spent 20 years in politics. As I said, my background is business, and politics have gotten us to where we are now in D.C., which is very dysfunctional on both sides. So I think we need to bring a fresh perspective, and I think business and healthcare background that I have in the military brings that.
You mentioned the dysfunction, obviously, that's going on as we speak right down there in D.C. What's your perspective on this motion to vacate? Were you there? Would you have been among the 8 Republicans telling McCarthy to take a hike? I
do not support telling Speaker McCarthy to vacate. I think the dysfunction, shame on both sides. All the Democrats and 8 grandstanding Republicans have completely shut down our government. No bills can be filed, no bills can be addressed. I think this is a shame.
You know, when it comes to that, you know, there are some people who are like, well, okay, there's disagreement there and obviously dysfunction. When it comes to shutting down the government, as you mentioned, is that something you would support essentially with these debt ceiling votes? You know, there's short-term funding, deal to get done. Would you be someone who's fighting there to say, hey, we need to fix things, but I'm happy with shutting down the government first to do that? You know,
in business, you can't shut down. We got to keep the doors open, the lights on. Like in 2008, during the economic downturn, when construction really bottomed out, we kept the doors open. We tightened the belt really tight. We made the cuts where we had to. Everybody got 40 hours. Nobody got laid off. We kept the doors open. We kept the company working. You have to do that with the government.
What's your perspective on the abortion issue? Obviously, this has really become much more important now since the Dobbs decision, and many people, including the presidential candidates on the Republican side, are saying that Washington should have a voice in this.
Right. I am pro-life. I also believe in the Constitution. I think the Supreme Court got it right. They gave it back to the states. And I think that's where it needs to stay, especially in a state like New Hampshire, where you can't throw a stone and not hit a legislator. You have more opportunity to get your voice and your opinion heard in New Hampshire than at the federal level. It needs to stay at the state level, and I support what the Supreme Court did.
And yet, these are your values, pro-life values. If there was abortion legislation in the House, would you be voting for it, or would you be voting against it based on that federalism principle?
I would not support a federal ban. It goes back to the state.
You know, if you had to identify a top issue for yourself that you're taking down there to D.C., what is it?
The #1 issue I hear across the state from the people I've talked to is the economy. We have, from day one when they shut down the pipeline, energy has gone up. My electric bill went up to over $600 a month last year. It more than doubled. So energy, food, inflation, mortgage rates, rent. I have a young man who came from the military to work with me. He had to go all the way, we're in Greenland, had to go all the way to Manchester to get an apartment. A 1-bedroom, $2,000. You can't afford that. So it's the economy's number one.
What about when it comes to tax policy? Anything you want to change down there in D.C.?
I'd have to take a look at each of the individual tax bills at this point.
Ukraine funding, where do you stand on that?
So when somebody's in crisis and you say you're going to help, you don't say I'm going to help and then come in a year later. When they needed help, we should have been there right in the beginning. And I do think we need to support Ukraine. But there's a lot of spending that is excessive, and we need to cut back. For example, $70 billion went to small businesses and farming in Ukraine. We have small businesses and farms here that are really hurting and need that support. So I don't support that type of funding. I do think we need to support them, though.
Do you think it's an existential threat that Putin, if he takes over the country without the American help, that, you know, if he wins, I guess, what are the consequences?
That's a hypothetical, but, you know, we worry. We worry where he's going to keep going. He said that he would keep moving forward, moving west.
Another thing that Congress is dabbling in these days, there's looking into impeaching President Biden. Where do you stand on that? Right
now, we're just at the House is at the inquiry stage. I think the American public have a right to know what information is out there and gather that and then make a decision whether or not there's enough to impeach. But I think it's fine to have an inquiry and let the American people know what's going on.
We're also seeing in the headlines that President Biden is now willing to build some border wall, continuing a policy from President Trump. What do you think about that?
I think the timing is interesting. I think he's always been very against the border wall. Pappas has been against the border wall. The Democrats have been. But now that the election is coming around and public opinion is starting to change, that has become... he started to build the border wall again. It's just interesting timing.
Is there anything else the U.S. should be doing down there with this migrant surge? I guess people thought that Trump was a little too controversial on that. Obviously, many believe Biden wasn't doing enough. What should be done policy-wise beyond building the wall?
I think immigration needs to be assessed, both legal and illegal immigration. Legal immigration is important. I mean, I believe in Buy American. I believe in reshoring our manufacturing. But we need to look at our legal immigration because we need workers. But illegal immigration, I would not hire somebody who their first act coming into the country is to break our law. We need to close the border. We need to reinforce stay in Mexico.
All right. Hollie Noveletsky, running for Congress in New Hampshire's 1st District. Thanks for joining us on Close Up.
Thank you so much for having me.
See you out there on the trail.
Thank you.